Play one more song. I'll tip you again." Claire Bennett set the bill on the piano without looking at the man behind it. A plain white man, in a rolled-up shirt, playing for coins. He smiled and began to play. Then a pilot stopped beside them and said, "Good evening, Director Harrison." Claire went cold. The man she had just tipped ran airport operations for the airline she was about to fly. Less than an hour later, he would be the only person who could get her to Denver. What happens to Claire next? Claire Bennett had walked through Terminal 5 at Los Angeles International so many times that she no longer saw it. She saw the departure boards, the security line, the distance to her gate measured in minutes. That Tuesday evening, she was moving faster than usual, wheeling a carry-on with one hand and holding her phone in the other, reading a message from her team in Denver for the 4th time. The client wanted the final numbers confirmed in person. 9 o'clock the next morning downtown, one conference room and signature. At 34, she ran marketing for a technology company that had grown faster than anyone in it had expected, including her. She had earned the job by outworking everyone around her, and she had learned somewhere in that climb to read a room in seconds. Who mattered? Who didn't? Who could move her forward, and who was scenery? It was efficient. It had never once cost her anything, which was exactly why she had stopped noticing she was doing it. The Denver contract was the largest of her career. If it closed, she would take the vice president title she had been circling for 2 years. If it didn't, the company lost a client it could not afford to lose, and every late night she had spent building toward that room would be filed under nothing in particular. She had rehearsed the presentation on the drive to the airport, out loud, alone in the car, and she was still rehearsing it in her head when she came through the atrium and heard the piano. There was a public piano near the center of the terminal, on a low platform between a coffee kiosk and a bank of charging stations. It had been donated years earlier by an arts foundation and was mostly used by travelers, hammering out 4 chords, and by people waiting on delays who wanted to feel like they were doing something with their hands. Nobody expected much from it. Most people walked past it the way they walked past the departure boards, aware it existed and unaware of what it said. Cole Harrison had been at the airport since 5 that morning. He was 38, and he held the title of Director of Airport Operations for the airline that owned 3/4 of the gates in that terminal. It meant that when a jet bridge failed, when a crew timed out, when a storm system parked itself over a hub and began knocking down connections like dominoes, the phone that rang belonged to him. He had spent the afternoon in a windowless room with 2 regional managers and a weather briefing, and when it ended, he did what he always did. He pulled off his tie, put it in his jacket pocket with his badge, rolled his sleeves to the elbow, and went to find the piano. He did not advertise what he did for a living. Some of that was temperament, and some of it was practical. A man in a suit with a lanyard around his neck could not stand in a terminal for 10 minutes without being asked to fix something. A man in a white shirt with his sleeves up could sit down and be nobody. Cole liked being nobody for 20 minutes. His whole job was moving thousands of people to places they needed to be, and the piano was the only part of his day where he was not required to control a single thing. I was in the middle of a slow piece when Claire came around the corner. A paper coffee cup sat on the lid beside him, half empty, left there because there was nowhere else to put it. She stopped without meaning to. 20 feet away, phone still in her hand. 2 other travelers had stopped as well. The sound was good, better than good, and for a moment the noise of the terminal thinned out around it. Then she did the arithmetic she always did. A man in an ordinary shirt. No lanyard. No uniform. A coffee cup sitting out where anyone could reach it. She had seen musicians in transit hubs before, in Chicago and Atlanta, and once in a station in Philadelphia, playing for whatever people dropped as they passed. She filed him and felt nothing about it, which was the part she would think about later. She was also at that moment furious. Not at him. At someone on her team who had sent a revised deck. 40 minutes before her flight, at a client who wanted a body in a room instead of a video call at the whole day. But anger has to go somewhere, and she was standing in front of a person she had already decided was beneath her. Claire took a bill from her wallet, walked to the edge of the platform, and set it on the piano beside the coffee cup. "Play one more song," she said. "I'll tip you again if it's good." Cole's hands stayed on the keys. He heard it exactly for what it was, and he understood the misunderstanding in the space of about 1 second. The cup, the clothes, the missing badge, the way she had not looked at his face when she spoke. He also heard the tone. It was not cruelty. It was somebody in a hurry, deciding that being polite was optional with this particular category of person. He could have corrected her. He could have taken the badge out of his pocket and let her feel what that felt like. 15 years in operations had taught him that the moment you use your title on someone, the conversation stops being about anything else. He looked at the bill for a moment. Then he looked up at her and he smiled. "What do you want to hear?" he asked. Claire had not expected a question. She had expected him to take the money. "Something slow," she said. "Something people like." Cole nodded and began to play. She had meant to keep walking. Her gate was 11 minutes away, and she had checked the time twice since she stopped. But he was not playing the way people play in airports. There was no hurry in it, no showing off, no leaning on the loud parts to pull a crowd. He played like the instrument was a room he had been in many times and knew the shape of in the dark. Claire stood there and felt the day come down out of her shoulders about half an inch, and she resented it slightly, and she stayed anyway. 2 more people stopped. Someone lifted a phone to record. Claire watched his hands and thought with a kind of distant charity that he was wasting himself. That someone this good should not be in a terminal collecting singles off a piano lid. It did not occur to her that the thought was still an insult wearing better clothes. She was reaching for her phone again when a woman in a pilot's uniform came up the concourse with a flight bag rolling behind her. Amelia Grant had 4 stripes on her sleeve and a lanyard she had not bothered to tuck in, and she was walking with the specific efficiency of someone who had just gotten off an aircraft. She slowed as she passed the platform. Then she stopped completely. "Good evening, Director Harrison," Amelia said. "I didn't know you were still here." The music did not stop. Claire's hand did. She was holding her phone at chest height, and it simply stayed there, unmoving, as though the muscles had received no further instructions. She looked at the pilot. She looked at the men at the piano. She replayed the sentence in her head to see whether she had assembled it wrong. Cole let the phrase he was in finish before he lifted his hands. "Long day," he said. "The weather packages came in late." Amelia set her bag upright. "That's actually what I was going to ask about. We came in from Seattle behind schedule, and there's a line of aircraft on the east side of the field with nowhere to go. Are we holding departures, or is that coming from the center?" "Both for the next hour," Cole said. "It's going to get worse before it settles." Claire heard the exchange, the way you hear a language you took 2 years of in school. She caught enough. Departures, holding, the center. This was not small talk between a musician and a crew member. This was a status report, delivered upward. Amelia said something else about crew scheduling, and Cole took his jacket off the bench beside him to check something in the pocket. He pulled out his phone, and with it, caught on the cord, came the lanyard he had put away 3/4 of an hour earlier. The badge swung once and settled against the side of the piano, face up at exactly the height of Claire's eyes. "Cole Harrison, Director," Airport Operations. The photograph on it was of the same man in a tie, not smiling. Claire felt the heat arrive in her face before she had finished processing it. She looked without wanting to at the bill she had put down on the lid. It was still sitting there, next to the coffee cup, exactly where she had placed it, a little folded from her wallet. She thought about the way she had said it. Not the words which were bad enough. The way she had said it, the flatness of it, the tiny lift at the end of, "If it's good," as though she were doing him a favor by setting terms. Amelia finished her question, thanked him, and went on, toward the crew room. Cole picked up the lanyard and put it back in his pocket without comment. "I'm sorry," Claire said. It came out faster than she wanted. I saw the cup and I thought—" She stopped because every version of the end of that sentence made it worse. "I'm sorry. That was rude of me." He could have made her stand in it. There had been a witness 30 seconds earlier, and there were still 4 or 5 people within earshot. And a single sentence would have cost him nothing, and cost her a great deal. Claire had spent enough time in conference rooms to know exactly how that sentence would be constructed. She braced for it. Cole rested his forearms on the edge of the keys. "You asked for a song," he said. "I played a song. Nothing more complicated than that." Claire did not know what to do with that. There was no edge in it. He was not being generous at her expense, and he was not waiting for her to thank him for his mercy. He had simply declined to make the moment about who was above whom, and in declining, he had made her aware that she had been keeping score the entire time, and he had not been playing. She reached over and took the bill off the piano lid. Her fingers were unsteady enough that she noticed it. "I have a flight," she said. "Denver," Cole said. Claire looked up sharply. He tipped his head toward the boarding pass sticking out of the side pocket of her bag, where she had shoved it after security. "It's printed on the top," he said. "Have a good one." She walked away with her face still burning, and did not look back. And she was already in her head, filing the whole thing under a bad 90 seconds in a bad day. She would be on an airplane in 20 minutes. She would be in Denver by 10:30. She would never see the man again. That was how these things worked. The gate area was fuller than it should have been. That was the first thing she registered. Not an announcement. Not an alarm. Just too many people standing when there were seats available, and all of them facing the same direction. Claire followed the direction. The board above the desk had gone from "on time" to a word she read 3 times before it meant anything. "Cancelled." A gate agent picked up the microphone and said, "What agents say?" And it was mostly drowned out by the sound of 140 people, all deciding at once to move. There had been an equipment problem on the inbound aircraft, and there was a weather system stacked across the route with holding and reroutes, and a ground delay program that had eaten the recovery options. The agent said the airline regretted the inconvenience. The agent said rebooking would be handled at the service center. The agent said something about hotel vouchers and was immediately surrounded. Claire did not move. Around her, the terminal reorganized itself into a line, and she stayed where she was, in the middle of it, with her hand on the handle of her bag. 9 o'clock. Downtown Denver. The client had flown in from Chicago specifically. There were 4 people on her team already in the city, with the printed materials, and there was a competitor who had been quietly circling this account for 11 months and would be delighted to hear that the marketing lead could not be bothered to show up. She thought about calling her boss and could not think of a version of that call that ended well. She opened the airline app. The next non-stop was at 6 the following morning, and it was already showing as full. She tapped through to the one after it. Full. She checked a competing carrier out of habit, and the fare that came back was 4 figures, for a seat that landed at 11:42 hours and 40 minutes after she needed to be in a chair with a pen in her hand. Claire stood in a terminal she had walked through 100 times and understood that she had no way to get where she was going. And then, because the mind does what it does, she thought about the piano. I was still back there. Probably. A man whose job was, as the pilot's questions had made perfectly clear, to know exactly which aircraft were where and why, and what could still be moved and what could not. The one person she had met that night with the authority to do anything about any of this. The same man she had tipped like a street performer 11 minutes ago. Claire looked down the concourse toward the atrium, where she could still faintly, over the noise of the gate, hear the piano. She did not move for a long moment. She was not weighing whether he could help her. She was weighing something smaller and much harder. Whether she could walk back down that concourse stand in front of him and ask. She did not go back right away. Pride does not work that fast. Instead, Claire did what she had done her entire adult life, which was to attack a problem from every angle available to a person with a credit card and a phone. She refreshed the app until it stopped loading. She called the customer service line and listened to a recorded voice tell her that call volumes were extremely high and that her estimated wait time was 55 minutes. She stood in the rebooking line at the service desk for 19 minutes and moved forward the length of one family. From that position, she could see the two agents behind the counter working with the specific mechanical calm of people who had been shouted at continuously since the board flipped. A man near the front was holding up his phone and reading a fare aloud, as though the number itself constituted an argument. A woman behind Claire kept saying to nobody that this was unacceptable. Claire worked the alternatives while she waited, because waiting without doing something was intolerable to her. Every remaining non-stop to Denver that night was gone. The first morning departure was full and had a standby list, 22 names deep. The competing carrier's arrival would put her downtown at 1:30, 4.5 hours after the meeting was supposed to start. She looked at driving. 15 hours, and that was without a storm. Sitting across the route, she looked at Colorado Springs and at a regional field 90 minutes out of Denver, and everything came back the same way, which was that a weather system does not care how badly you want something. At some point in the middle of all of this, Claire stopped and realized her hands were shaking. Not from fear, exactly. From the sensation of pushing against something that would not move, which was an experience she had almost no practice with. She had built an entire career on the belief that enough pressure applied in the right place would always open a door. She had never met a door that simply was not there. She stepped out of the line. The atrium was quieter than the gate area. Cole was no longer at the piano. He was standing about 15 feet from it, with 3 employees around him. 2 gate agents in uniform vests and a supervisor holding a tablet. And he was talking with his hand still one finger tapping a point on the tablet screen. Claire stopped at the edge of the group and did not interrupt. She heard maybe 40 seconds of it. He was asking where the affected passengers were being routed and how many of them were connecting onward past Denver, and when the supervisor gave him a number, he asked her to check it again against a different system, because the two would not match. He never raised his voice. He never once said the word, "I." The agents around him were visibly less frantic at the end of the conversation than at the beginning. And Claire, who managed 11 people and had read a great deal about leadership, noticed this and did not entirely know how he had done it. The group broke apart. Cole turned and saw her standing there. Whatever she had rehearsed in the line went away. Claire looked at him and understood that there was no version of this that let her keep her dignity intact. and that trying to keep it intact was precisely what had gotten her here. "My flight's canceled," she said. "I know that isn't your fault. I'm not here to complain about it." Cole waited. "I came back because I owe you a real apology," Claire said. "Not the one I gave you when I was embarrassed. I looked at you sitting at that piano, and I decided what you were worth in about 2 seconds. And then I spoke to you, like that was a fact. I judged you before I knew anything about you." Her voice did not do what she expected it to. It stayed level. "That's who I've apparently become, and I found that out in front of you. So I'm sorry." He considered her for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You said it. I heard it. I'm not going to make you say it twice." He pushed his sleeves back up where they had slipped. "Now tell me what your itinerary was." Claire gave him the flight number. He typed it into his phone and read for a few seconds, and his expression did not change in a way she could interpret. "I want to be clear about something before we go further," Cole said. "I can look at things most people at this airport can't look at. That's the whole job. What I can't do is take a seat away from somebody who's already holding it, and I can't put you ahead of the standby list because you had a bad conversation with me, and you're trying to make it up. If there's a way to get you moved, it happens inside the rules, or it doesn't happen. I need you to hear that now, instead of in an hour." Claire had spent the last 40 minutes constructing arguments for why she was a special case, and she abandoned all of them. "Understood," she said. "Then walk with me. I think better moving." They went up the concourse together. It was somewhere between 8:30 and 9, and the terminal had entered the particular state of a hub in trouble, where every gate area was fuller than its own flight, and the announcements had started to overlap. Cole moved through it without hurrying and without weaving, and people made room for him, without seeming to notice they were doing it. "Why Denver?" he asked. "Specifically, not the city. What's waiting?" "A contract," Claire said. 9 in the morning. The client came in from Chicago to sign it, and my whole team is already there with the materials. And if you're not in the room..." She started to give him the answer she would have given her boss, the clean one about relationship risk and competitive exposure. It came out differently. "Then I've spent 7 years on something that turns out not to have been going anywhere," she said. "I've missed a lot to get here. I told myself all of it was an investment. If this falls apart tomorrow morning, then it wasn't an investment. It was just a lot of missed things." Cole did not comfort her, and did not agree with her, which she found she preferred. "That's useful," he said. "Not the way you think. It tells me the deadline is 9, and it isn't 9:30. He stopped at an unmarked door beside a shuttered newsstand badged in and held it open. Inside was a narrow operations room with 2 workstations and a wall of monitors showing the airfield in a color scheme that meant nothing to her. A duty manager glanced up, saw who it was, and slid over one seat. Cole sat down and started working. Claire stood behind him and watched screens she could not read, Jill with rows she could not interpret. And she did the hardest thing she had done all evening, which was to keep her mouth shut for 4 straight minutes. "There's no direct," he said finally. "Everything to Denver tonight is gone, and everything tomorrow morning is oversold before the standby list, so we stopped trying to go to Denver. That's the whole problem. That's the whole assumption." He turned the monitor slightly so she could see it. "Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. Departs 10:40. It's showing seats, and the reason it's showing seats is that a bank of connecting passengers just got reaccommodated off it when their onward flights went down. So the inventory came back into the system about 20 minutes ago. From Salt Lake, there's a first departure to Denver at 6:15 in the morning. It lands at 8:05 Mountain Time." Claire did the arithmetic. "That's 55 minutes before the meeting." In a city you'd be landing in for the first time in weather with a signature to make. It's not comfortable. It's real. He was already picking up the desk phone. The catch is that this only works if the Salt Lake leg pushes on schedule. I can put you on it. I can't promise you the sky. He called down to the counter and spoke to a supervisor named Marcus Webb, and the conversation was entirely procedural. The record locator, the reaccommodation code, the fare rules, whether the change fell inside the involuntary policy given the cancellation. Claire listened to a man with the authority to simply order something. Instead, spend 3 minutes making sure the thing he wanted was permitted. When he hung up, he wrote a gate number on a slip of paper and handed it to her. Go see Marcus at desk 14. He's expecting you. Everything's done in the system already. He just needs your identification. 10 minutes later, Claire was holding a new boarding pass, and the disbelief on her face was strong enough that Cole, coming up behind her, actually noticed it. You changed my flight, she said. I changed your route, Cole said. Denver is still where you're going. She looked at him. Something in the sentence sat wrong and right at the same time, and it stayed with her long after the practical part of the evening had moved on. She had been so fixed on a single flight number that she had confused the flight with the destination, and it had taken a man she had tipped 1 hour earlier to point out that these were not the same thing, and underneath that, quietly a second thought she liked much less. She had made the same mistake about him. She had looked at a shirt and a coffee cup and a piano and mistaken the surface for the person. And the alarming part was not that she had been wrong about a job title. The alarming part was that she had needed the job title to exist in order to feel that she had done anything wrong at all. Gate 71 was crowded, and the aircraft was at the gate, which Claire took as a good sign for 11 minutes. Then the board pushed the departure from 10:40 to 11:15. 9 minutes after that, it went to 11:50. She felt the old machinery come back online instantly. She was at the podium before she had decided to walk there, asking the agent what the delay was attributed to, and whether the crew was legal, and what the projected wheels up was using the words she had picked up from Cole an hour earlier, as though owning the vocabulary gave her standing. The agent gave her the answer she had already given 4 other people. Claire found Cole near the window with his phone against his ear, finishing a call. She waited for him to lower it. It's slipping, she said. If it goes past 1, the connection in Salt Lake is meaningless. There has to be something. You're the operations director for this entire airport. You can get an aircraft prioritized. You can push a slot. You can do something. Some of that I can do, Cole said. None of it for you. That's not. Listen to what I actually said. He turned to face her fully. Right now, there are about 2,000 people in this terminal, in some version of your situation, and about 900 of them have a reason as good as yours. I can make decisions that help all of them, or a category of them. The second I start making one for the woman who happens to be standing next to me, I'm not doing operations anymore. I'm doing favors. The job gives me the ability to solve problems. It does not give me permission to break the thing that makes the solving fair. Claire opened her mouth and closed it. She had heard men in her own company say versions of this sentence, and every time it had been a shield for someone who did not want to be bothered. This was not that. He had spent the last hour proving he would work the problem. He was simply refusing to work it for her at somebody else's expense. She sat down 2 seats away from him and stopped talking for a while, and something in her chest slowly unclenched. She watched him take a call about a jet bridge and another about a crew rest requirement. And in between, he sat perfectly still and did not look at his phone once. She had never in her life been near someone who was not visibly braced. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Why the piano?" You run an airport. You could be anywhere. You sit down in the middle of a terminal where anyone can walk up to you. Cole let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Because I spend the whole day moving thousands of people to places they need to be. Every hour of it is a decision about somebody else's night. The piano is the only 20 minutes where I'm not in charge of anything. He tipped his head toward the concourse. The fact that nobody knows who I am out there is a feature, not a problem. You weren't the first person to leave money on that lid. You were just the first one I talked to about it. Claire absorbed that and found it worse than being scolded. For what it's worth, he said, I learned the not in charge part. Late. I'm a single father. That'll teach you faster than any operations job that control and strength aren't the same thing. Half of being strong is knowing exactly which part of a situation is outside your hands and putting it down. The board changed again while he was speaking, 12:20. Claire watched it and felt the arithmetic collapse. Even a perfect taxi, a perfect climb, a perfect approach into Salt Lake. Put her on the ground somewhere near 3 in the morning, and the 6:15 would go without her, because she would not clear the gate in time from a late arrival, and the next one would land in Denver at 11. Cole was already looking at his phone, and she could tell from the number of times he scrolled that he was checking things. He had checked twice before. He tried 3 carriers, 2 regional feeders, and a routing through Phoenix that died on the second leg. He put the phone face down on his knee. There's nothing, he said. Not tonight. Not that gets you into a chair at 9. Check again. I've checked it 4 ways. You're the director. Her voice came apart in the middle of the word. There has to be something you can do. Cole looked at her, and there was no impatience in it at all, which somehow made it land harder. A title doesn't make impossible things possible, he said. Claire sat with that. She had organized her entire adult life around the opposite proposition, that the higher you climbed, the more of the world became negotiable. That a title was not just recognition, it was leverage. It was the ability to make the immovable move, and the people who could not make things move were simply people who had not climbed high enough yet. It was why she had wanted the vice presidency. It was why she had looked at a man in an ordinary shirt at a piano and known, instantly and without malice, what he was worth, and the highest-ranking person she had met all night. The one whose name a captain had said, with respect, 30 feet from that piano, was the first person she had ever heard admit out loud that power has an edge and that he had found it. The gate agent picked up the microphone and said that the departure was now estimated at 12:50. Claire did not react. There was nothing left in the estimate that mattered. Somewhere in Denver, a client from Chicago was asleep in a hotel. 4 of her people were laying materials out on a table for a meeting she would not be attending, and every route between here and that room was closed. Claire stayed in the seat for a long time after the announcement. Around her, the gate area had gone quiet in the way that happens after midnight, when people stop arguing and start arranging their coats into pillows. She had her phone in both hands, and she was not looking at it. She was composing the message to her boss. She had gotten as far as the second sentence 4 separate times, and deleted it each time, because every version of it was an explanation of why the failure was not hers, and she could hear how it would read at 7 in the morning to a man who had put her on this account. Cole was still 2 seats down. He had taken 2 more calls, and had not once suggested she go find a hotel, which she noticed, and did not have the energy to thank him for. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You don't have to answer it, and it isn't going to be helpful in the way you want." Claire made a gesture that meant, "Go ahead." "Do you need to be in Denver?" Cole said. "Or do you need to solve the problem waiting for you in Denver?" She started to say that those were the same thing. The sentence formed and did not come out because somewhere between her chest and her mouth it stopped making sense. She had been running on a single instruction for 6 hours. Be in the room. It had been so absolute that she had spent an entire night attacking the transportation problem routes, seats, fares, whether a man with authority, and had never once looked at the sentence itself. The client had not asked for her body in a chair. The client had asked for the final numbers, confirmed the terms, walked through, and a signature. She had translated that into presence, because presence was how she had always done it. And then she had defended the translation as though it had come down from somewhere. "The materials are already there," she said slowly. "Everything's already there. It's the 4 of them, and the deck, and the pricing model. And the only thing that isn't there is me." "Then that's a different problem," Cole said. "And it's a much smaller one." Claire looked at the time. It was 1 in the morning in Los Angeles, which made it 2 in Denver. She was about to make a phone call that every instinct she had was screaming at her not to make, because it required her to say the sentence she had spent 7 years arranging her life to avoid. She stood and left the Salt Lake boarding pass on the seat beside her. It was no longer a place she needed to go. She called Diane Prescott, her senior account lead, who picked up on the 4th ring with the voice of a woman who had been asleep for 2 hours. "I'm at the airport in Los Angeles," Claire said. "My flight canceled and there's no route that gets me to you before 11. I'm not going to be in that room." There was a silence on the line, and then Diane said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" That answer was not the one Claire had braced for, and she registered with a small, cold feeling that she had expected panic because she had trained the team to panic. She had built a group of people who waited for her because she had never once let them not wait for her. "I'm going to run it from here," Claire said, "on video. But I need you in the room as the presence, and I need you to have the authority to move on the terms without calling me, because I'm not going to have you stepping into a hallway every 11 minutes in front of the client." Diane, more awake now, said, "You've never given anybody signing authority on your own account." "I'm aware." Cole walked her up to an empty conference room on the mezzanine level of the terminal, badged the door, and handed her the room without ceremony. "It's yours as long as you need it. Nobody has it booked." He nodded at the table. "The wireless up here drops about every 40 minutes. There's a wired port underneath. Use that." Then he left, and Claire set her laptop down under a single bank of fluorescent lights and rebuilt the entire meeting from the wrong end of it. She sent Diane the pricing model, with the 2 concession tiers unlocked. And then she did something, which was to write out in plain language where the floor was and why, so that a decision she had always kept in her own head became a document somebody else could act on. She wrote the 3 questions the client was most likely to open with, and the answers, and marked which of them Diane should take herself rather than passing to the screen. They worked the plan back and forth until close to 3. Claire found the wired port under the table, exactly where Cole had said it would be, and tested the video link twice against her own phone. At 4, she stopped and sat in the empty room and felt something she had not expected, which was that she was not afraid. She had walked into that terminal at 7 the previous evening, believing that if she was not personally holding every piece of a thing, the thing would fall. An entire night of being unable to hold anything had removed the option, and what was left underneath it was a plan that did not depend on her being in a chair in Colorado. The meeting started at 9:02 Mountain Time. Claire ran it from a folding chair at Los Angeles International, with her laptop propped on a stack of safety manuals, so the camera sat at eye level. She opened by naming the situation before anyone could ask about it. That she was in an airport in California because of a cancellation, that she had chosen to lead the discussion this way rather than delay it, and that Diane had full authority to close in the room. The client was a man named Robert Hale, who had built a distribution company across 4 states and had a reputation for reading discomfort in people. He listened to that opening with no expression at all. Then he said that he appreciated being told and asked her to start on page 11, which was the pricing. It was not a comfortable 90 minutes. Hale pushed hard on the implementation timeline and harder on the second-year escalator, and twice the conversation moved faster than the video allowed. And both times, Diane took it in the room without looking at the screen for permission. Claire watched her do it and understood that she had been managing a person who had been ready for 18 months, at the point where Hale asked for a concession. Claire had not anticipated she did not stall. She said she needed 90 seconds. Muted herself, ran the number against the floor. She had written down in the middle of the night unmuted and gave him a modified version that held margin and gave him the timing he actually wanted. He looked at it for a while, and then he said that would work. They signed at 10:50 Mountain Time. Diane sent a photograph of the last page, and Claire looked at it on a laptop screen in a windowless room, while a boarding announcement for somewhere else came through the wall. She did not feel triumphant. She felt like someone who had spent a night discovering that the thing she had been protecting for 7 years had not needed protecting. Her boss called at 11:15 Pacific Time and spent most of the conversation asking how she had structured the authority handoff, which was not a question she had ever been asked before. Then he asked whether she wanted to talk about the vice presidency the following week, and she said yes, and hung up and sat there, noticing that the word had lost about half its weight overnight. Claire came down to the main concourse a little before noon with her bag and a face that had not been asleep. The terminal had reset itself. The people who had been building nests out of coats at midnight were gone. The boards were mostly green, and the airfield beyond the windows was doing what it did on a normal Wednesday. The piano was where it always was. So was Cole in a different shirt sleeves rolled, playing something quiet with his badge nowhere in sight. He had gone home at 4 and come back at 10, which was the closest thing to sleep the night had allowed, and he had come straight back to the 20 minutes he had told her about. Claire sat down on the low bench at the edge of the platform, where people waited with nothing in her hands at all. Cole glanced at the empty lid beside him, then at her. "No tip this time." "I think I misunderstood the price," Claire said. He almost laughed and kept playing. She told him about the meeting briefly without dressing it. That it had closed. That her account lid had carried the room. That the question he had asked her at 1 in the morning had been the only useful thing anyone said to her all night, and that it had annoyed her considerably at the time. "It wasn't advice," Cole said. "It's just the question I ask myself when an airplane breaks. You can spend all night trying to fix the airplane, or you can ask what the airplane was for." "Would you play something?" Claire said. "If you have time." The difference between that sentence and the one she had used the previous evening was almost nothing on paper. It was 4 or 5 words arranged politely, but she heard the difference, and so did he, because it was not an instruction issued downward to a person she had priced. It was a request made to someone whose time she now understood to be worth something, and it could be refused. Cole played. Claire sat and watched the concourse move past them, and for the first time in longer than she could account for, she was not doing anything else at the same time. 9 days later, she was back at Los Angeles International on the rescheduled trip to Denver that the contract had generated a proper visit this time 3 days, with Robert Hale's operations team and a signed agreement to build against. She came through the atrium in the early evening and heard the piano before she saw it, and she knew the touch before she rounded the corner, which surprised her. Cole was sitting exactly where he had been sitting the first night. the same rolled sleeves, no lanyard. A woman walked past him with a phone to her ear and did not look up. Two men waiting for a shuttle listened for a while and moved on. Somewhere in that terminal, an operations problem was either happening or about to, and none of the people flowing around that platform had any idea that the man playing for them held one of the most consequential jobs in the building. Claire stood and watched and started laughing quietly at herself. She went to the kiosk and she came back and she set a coffee down on the lid in the exact spot where she had left the money. "Play one more song." Cole glanced at the cup, then at her. "How much are you tipping?" Claire pulled the bench over and sat down. "Nothing," she said. "I know you can afford your own coffee now." He laughed out loud at that and started to play. The first time Claire Bennett stood in front of that piano, she had seen a man in an ordinary and decided in under 2 seconds, and without noticing she was doing it, that he stood somewhere below her. This time, she saw the same man, and the same clothes, the same instrument, a coffee cup on the same lid, and she did not need to know his title to give him her respect. The message, the story closes on one plain idea. Do not use a person's clothes, their job, or the position you imagine they occupy, to decide how much decency they are owed. Claire only felt ashamed after she learned Cole was a director. The more important lesson is the one that came later. She should never have needed him to be a director in order to treat him like a human being in the first place. A title changes how the world looks at someone. It does not add 1 ounce to their dignity, and it does not remove one. And sometimes the person we are quickest to look down on is the one who shows us that we cannot always change our circumstances, but we can always change how we treat the people in front of us and how we find our way forward when the road we planned on closes